Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Reviews. My name is Jillian Robinson. I am the artistic producer of the Cup, and I am joined by both of our co-artistic producers, Ryan Barakovich and Mackenzie Horner. How are you
Buongiorno.
both doing?
Yeah.
We're doing good. I can't complain. I mean, I'm a little windswept, a little wet from being out at sea, but
Yeah,
we're
this
doing okay.
this was an awfully nautical festival, wasn't it?
Hence
Yes.
why I got my nautically,
Yeah.
knit sweat. Like I kind of knit cardigan on. I felt it was
Mhm.
very appropriate attire.
Nice.
So before we get too far out into sea, let's let
Mm.
everyone know what we're going to be chatting about today. So we're going to be covering the Alumni Theatre FireWorks Festival 2023 that's happened here at Alumni Theatre in Toronto this past November. So we're going to be doing a little roundup session post-festival, similar to what we've done with the Toronto Fringe Festival in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So the plays at the festival presented were the Caligula Exiles, written by Sarah Daniel Pittman and directed by Cassidy Sadler. As I
Mhm.
wade my way through these, apologies if I mispronounce anybody's name. The second play that was presented was Smokeville by Genevieve Adam and directed by Darcy Gerhardt. And the third play that was presented was The Great Kelleys by Natalie Freya and directed by Shannon Farrell. So we will be going through each of those pieces and offering our thoughts and deep dives. But before, again, like I said, before we get too far away from the shore, let's bring us in with our icebreaker. So, Mac, what is in your cup today? What are you sipping with us?
Well, Jill, I have my usual Crystal Light, strawberry banana Crystal Light, and I am once again drinking from my new Stratford Richard II mug that I felt had a very appropriate saying of, "For God's sake, let us sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings." I felt that was
Okay.
a very worthy quote for this type of festival because there was a lot of death and ghosts in this festival. So I was like, "This is the mug we need today." So
Mhm.
there we go. That is what I'm
Love
drinking, and
that.
I have my country plaid on, and I got my knit cardigan as well, getting into that kind of East Coasty and fireside vibe. So there you go.
Nice.
There you go.
Love that. And your background is serving themes as well. We love it.
Yes,
For
yes, yes, yes. It's the
visual
image from
watchers.
Caligula Exiles. So
Nice.
representing the first
Amazing.
show that Ryan and I saw at the festival.
Correct. And Ryan, how about you? What are you sipping with us?
Yes, in my cup. So I just have coffee. We are recording this fairly early in the morning. We've used this mug on the show before. It's got a bit of a Toronto skyline. It's a Canadian Tire 100th anniversary mug. But I noticed when I was trying to pick a mug this morning that it has little firework explosions on it. So in addition to this being a festival of new Canadian works from Toronto, I couldn't resist the fireworks imagery that accompanied it. So that's my cup.
Amazing.
Love it.
And I am drinking out of our The Cup cup, their little logo. I'm drinking some maple flavored coffee, so staying on
Ooh.
brand with Canadian new works. My ensemble was kind of just what was available on top of my vanity this morning, to be honest. But I do realize this is a festival that celebrates plays by women, and I do have the sort of, red poignant that is a color that celebrates women. So yeah, so that's where we're going with
Mm.
that ensemble today. And I have some water because hydration station as always. Yes,
Love that.
amazing. Love that. Okay, so let's dive in. I love that we've already kind of peppered in some of the themes and common occurrences between these three plays that were a part of the Fireworks Festival. So just kind of right out the gate, some of us were available to see some of the shows and some of us weren't. So as we
Mhm.
wade our way through the festival, at the top, I'm just going to share which one of us got to see the play. And then those of us who will have sort of the space to offer thoughts and join in on the playground of that piece. So to start us off, yes, Mac, do you have something or?
No, I was just giving the
No,
thumbs up.
good,
It sounds like a
great.
plan.
Love that. Okay. So to start us off, the first play that was presented at the festival happened the week of November 8th to the 12th. So this was the Caligula Exiles. And both Ryan and Mackenzie, you got to see that one. Unfortunately, I was out of town, so I did not. But so Ryan, if you want to start us off, give us a little synopsis of what that piece was all about, and then I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
All right, so very quickly, the Caligula Exiles is a play set at a lighthouse. It follows 3 characters. We have this kind of curmudgeon-y lighthouse keeper named Gus. Believe they said it's short for Augusta at one point. It's doing the very fun thing where a female character has a shortened version of their name that makes them sound male. Make of it what you will. And she is alone in this lighthouse, but is haunted by a ghost named Phoebe. And also, I'll say the actor names as we go. So Gus is played by Andrea Lyons, and Phoebe is played by Karen Skora. Once again, same blanket statement. Apologies if anybody's name gets mispronounced here. So there's this, and apologies with these descriptions, because now we've seen the Caligula Exiles 3 weeks ago, as per the sequence. So apologies if some of these details are misremembered here. So Gus and Phoebe are at this lighthouse together for a long period of time. We learn that Gus has a bit of a tragic backstory, but the details of which unfold as the play goes on. And Phoebe has perished at sea and now is unable to leave the land of this little lighthouse. She spurts poetry and has big romantic ideals, which frustrates her very prosaic, salt-of-the-earth lighthouse keeper who speaks with some kind of, I forget if they ever specified the location. Are we in like Cape Breton or Newfoundland?
It's just a lonely island in the ocean.
Vaguely maritime coded,
Very
especially
maritime.
in the way that Gus speaks.
Yeah.
So, we have the two of them together, a bit of an odd couple type situation here, but then the plot in earnest sort of kicks into motion when a young man in a speedboat crashes nearby and stumbles into the lighthouse and is stuck there. His name was Tristan. He's played by Adrian Chevalier. And he's essentially a rich kid from a very wealthy, politically connected family who...
Right-wing politically connected family.
Right, yes. And he was trying to run away from it all, the life that...
With a hippie. Free love and hippie.
Yeah, free love and hippie. But after, a couple days or a week or so of, trying that lifestyle on for size, he realized that, he misses all the luxuries of his fancy rich boy life and just wants to, go back to it, get a fancy, business job with a large salary in an office. And he tried to be rebellious, but it wasn't for him. Yeah. So basically now he is stranded at this lighthouse. There is presumably at first no boat with which he can be sent away. And because there's some shady stuff going on at the lighthouse, Gus is very reluctant to contact the Coast Guard because of her own personal reasons. So he's stuck there until they can find another way to get him off and back home. And Phoebe, as this young lady ghost who has not seen a young man in a long time, is instantly stricken with him, mainly because of just how romantic and ideal it is to have this young man alone, forlorn from his home at this lighthouse. So there's this kind of interesting dynamic. Ian's character, Tristan, is unable to see the ghost Phoebe, which is interesting. So there was a lot of weird stuff. We can maybe unpack this a little bit about the corporeality of the ghost or the spectral logic of how this works, because Gus is able to see Phoebe, but Tristan can't see Phoebe, but also Phoebe is able to touch things and move items. So it kind of raises a bit of a question of, is this a ghost that is something sort of conjured up by Gus's imagination, or is this like an actual metaphysical being? But the script kind of does go through some logic of what allows her to be real or to interact with the space and not, but a lot of those details maybe kind of like get brought up very quietly or quickly, and as much as the script tries to present it as a logic of how the metaphysics of this world works, you kind of really have to be following closely to get it at times. So yeah, like, I don't know how much like spoiler wise we want to get into. I know these plays are all done at the FireWorks Festival, but they will hopefully have afterlives beyond this that maybe people don't want to have big spoilers throughout a lot of these things.
Let's not spoil too much.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Let's try and keep some ambiguity about how the play ends.
Yeah, the ending is something I maybe want to talk about. I don't know. We will see as we go through each of these.
You know what? I will make the executive decision. We're gonna pop a firework on this right now of just a potential spoiler alert. If
The
you don't
potential
want,
spoiler firework. Okay.
Before we put that potential up, let's just talk broad strokes like about the
Alright.
production, so people who
Sounds
want to know
great.
about that without spoilers can, and then we'll put it up before we make a point of making spoilers.
perfect.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Great.
So, Mac, I've given a bit of a rambly description. What do you have to say about this piece? Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, so spoiler alert for Mackenzie.
Okay.
I saw two shows.
Yeah.
I saw this and the Great Kelleys, and this was the first show. And after seeing both plays, I found this play had much better pacing. I felt the actors had really good energy and were able to kind of really move through the action. This play by I found the playwright kind of did a very good Dan Brownian style of writing. Sarah Pittman, where every scene ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, and you're like, okay, what's going to happen next? You know, I've never just one scene ends with a monologue and then they just walk away. There's always some bit of uplifting action that's going to kick us up into the next moment. So you're always like, okay, next scene. You know, you never kind of like, okay, and that monologue's done. Let's see where we're going next. It's like everything is slowly but surely building and building and building and building. It's a good slow burn. It's an old class and Agatha Christie kind of ghost story, slow burn story, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, at first I asked around because this felt kind of like a older play, so I was like, is this an older play that, you know, Gus was maybe a male character at one point, and then during a rewriting revival session of this production, they changed the gender of Gus, and Grant's like, nope, it's a whole new play. I'm like, well, that's great.
It's a whole festival of new works is the point.
It's a whole festival of new works. Mac was tired after work and didn't click that together.
It's all good.
So, but now that Mac knew that, I was like, okay, that makes sense. But I think that just goes to the good writing of Sarah Pittman, where this play felt like a very classic kind of 1950s, 1960s three-hander ghost story play. It definitely captured that old school style of writing and feeling. So I definitely want to give a shout out to Sarah for that. Generally speaking, I thought the direction was well done. I thought, once again, as I said, the director's job is to keep the story moving, to keep the energy up in the cast, to keep things planted and focused. I thought that was well done. Like, there's a lot of times where, you know, you have characters speaking over top of each other. So the fact that, you know, you have the good direction of being able to pull the focus where needed and knowing how to direct the actors to say, yeah, you're going to speak over top of each other, but, you know, this is how we're going to do it to make sure the key information is, you know, getting out. And nothing's being missed. I think that's a really good hand. And I mean, the fact that Cassidy did The Curious Voyage with Talkers Free Theatre, we don't know, was a big two-part extravaganza where it started in Barrie and ended up flying people over to England. You know, there's a lot of logistics that go into that. And I'm not sure which part Cassidy was part of, but I assume she was part of more of the Barrie part, not the England part. But that being said, like, that stuff is all, once again, interactive ghost story stuff here in Barrie. So the fact she conceived that and put this all together again, she got a knack for this. So bravo to her. And then casting wise, you know, we've seen Karen in a Bone Cage, so great to see her again performing. We'll get more into her character. We'll get more into the characters once the spoiler firework goes up, because I don't want to spoil anything major. But I'll say Kara did a great job as this kind of youthful ghost. She has a very youthful energy about her in the last two roles we've seen her in. So I think she totally fits that. Andrea Lyons as Gus, once again, really had a very natural way of tackling this old schooly fisherman dialogue that for other people I could see them getting tripped up by that type of language. But she seemed to have a natural way about it. I mean, looking at her bio, she did August Osage County. And she's done a few Shakespearean productions. So clearly she's not unfamiliar with kind of older, heavier text. So
it fits well in her mouth. Yeah,
it fits very well. And then, you know, Adrian as Tristan. I mean, he was wonderful. He was the classic preppy, you know, guy. And I mean, he just totally played the fish out of water character so well. And I mean, the whole time I was like, yeah, no, he's got to get back to land. You can't keep him here. Like, clearly he's not happy. Like, he did a very good job of making very persuasive arguments as to why he has to get off this rock. So, you know, I thought it was very good. I thought the three of them together had a very good chemistry. So I was very impressed with this first outing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Ryan?
no, I would agree with pretty much all of that. Yeah. In addition to, sorry, you shouted out Bone Cage as an example where we've seen Karen before. I also, more recently, during the Fringe Festival, one of the shows that I saw, and you didn't, Back to the Bar, which also featured Karen in a major role and was directed by Cassidy Sadler. So nice to see this artistic team reuniting in a certain way. Yeah, I agree with. I feel like it'd be redundant for me to just like go through character by character with all of them. I concur with everything you've said. I think to talk about Adrian in particular, because I think you're absolutely right, because that character, I think he did something very interesting in the portrayal where, it's a very unlikable person. He, because he's just like so comfortably wealthy. He's, I forget all the funny lines he had about like, only having 2 cars and, just that how, I forget all of them, but there was some funny stuff there. But I think he brought this interesting, I don't want to say pathos to the character because it was sort of hard to, relate to or sympathize with him. But as much as he, as an actor, I think was comfortable with us as the audience disliking him, he brought no personal judgment to the role. He really, I think, did a great job of getting into the mind frame of, the audience is going to hate me, but I have to love this person. And I think he did that really well. The other two,
by the end, I didn't hate his character because, this is a character who, is a young man trying to, to use nautical terms, but, sail his way through uncharted waters of life where, he thinks, he's in that prime young love phase where he thinks, oh my goodness, this girl who is so different from anything I've known is, the thing for me. But then he goes, oh, maybe not. Maybe I need more of my own creature comforts again. And he has to go back. I definitely think definitely think, as you said, he brought a humanity to this role where like I could understand where he was coming from. This is a guy who's not used to being on a lighthouse rock, foraging for himself, milking a goat, and or building a raft. None of that, and his frustration is palpable. Like the whole thing with the one part where he's trying to build a raft, you can clearly get why he's getting frustrated with the situation and why he's kind of getting freaked out by this person who's talking to herself, So you're right. Humanity.
Yeah. No, I think it's good, and I think it's a special challenge that I want to single him out for in particular because the other 2 characters were innately likable. So there was like they didn't have the same hurdle. They still brought very interesting acting choices to it. But I think it's nice to see somebody taking a character that the audience will not like. Do your best to make the audience like them, and then also just find like what is it like what makes this character tick? Why are they the way they are? Even if we might disagree with him and his motives, to still find things that make him work. So
it's
across the board. Yeah, please, Jill.
From what you're just both saying, and again, me just being like hearing things like milk a goat, and I'm like, I did not see this play, but hearing you unpack, it almost seems like it's Tristan and Gus are from 2 different worlds, but like still alive, inhabiting the world we live in, but on this isolated island and that Phoebe inhabits. It's like very much you have 2 people operating in their own worlds on the tangible world, and you have this leeway character that's representing the like ethereal afterlife.
And Phoebe is a whole different world. All 3 characters are kind of their own separate worlds, which is very interesting because there is this, old world classy. I don't know if it was ever explicitly stated as Victorian, but she is from a completely different time.
She feels very Victorian with the dress she's wearing. It's very, kind of Victorian. Well, spoiler firework. Can we put that up, Jill?
I think it's been up because here's the thing. I think it's been up because I think it also depends on how much individually what we each want to spoil and not spoil. So it's been up. I think.
I guess it's been up.
I'm putting it up now because
okay.
So far, it's not a spoiler.
Yes. Okay.
Ryan has done a very good job of navigating that.
Give people the option to stop.
Yes. Okay, so watching. Spoiler firework is coming on the screen now. Cool. Go for it.
Okay, I do want to talk about the ending and some. Well, I don't know if we want to start there, but I think this might be sadly a recurring motif throughout these reviews, but most of the critiques I have with these productions do come down to the writing, and these are new works in their presumably first production, so it's understandable that a lot of the writing still needs to be refined. All 3 productions did have accredited dramaturg, and it's hard to know the extent to which that intervention has taken place, what the previous drafts of these scripts we didn't see looked like before that intervention. But I do think there is still some finagling to do with these plays. In this one in particular, and I'll make a similar comment when we get to the Great Kelleys later, because those were the 2 plays that both had intermissions, or in the second act, the way that Smokeville did not. None of these plays need intermissions, or a second act for that matter. I think there definitely is trimming that could have been done to make these very tight 1 acts as opposed to these sprawling 2-act epics. Or a particularly funny thing that I remember seeing in the description that was on the Alumnae website about this play is that, I'm going to pull it up because I think it's funny. Sorry, this is a tangent here, but they describe this show as this epic tale is a lyrical blend of humor and tragedy. Epic, lyric, comedy, tragedy. That's all of the genres in a classical sense. Which one is it? Is it all? How does that work? And I don't know. I feel like there's a precision of language might be helpful here, but I think, pacing wise, I could definitely see things that felt redundant that could have been cut if they had more of a necessity to make this a shorter piece. We have a bit too long of a sequence early on where Gus misleads Tristan into thinking they don't have a boat, only to reveal later that indeed they do have a boat. We probably could have skipped most of that and just yep, I do have a boat, and then skip ahead to the part where, spoilers, Phoebe dismantles the boat to prevent them from leaving. Which
that was a great cliffhanger with the axe.
Well, it did make, and that's why I think they wanted to have the intermission, because we have Phoebe walking out with the axe, oh my god, is she going to kill them? What's she going to do? She just destroys the boat. And it made for a great cliffhanger, but I think we could have just gotten to that moment quicker in a shorter version of this play that didn't leave us hanging the same way. Yeah, so that's something that I do think pacing-wise, I definitely do see places where fat could be trimmed. I hope as this piece continues getting reworked. I know I hinted wanting to talk about the ending, but anything you want to comment on before I get there?
So yeah, I agree. I mean, definitely there are some early scenes that did kind of feel a bit repetitive. That I feel like you could have kind of combined moments together to tighten up the script a bit. But I mean, I did enjoy the intermission ending on the axe walk.
I agree.
I did think that was a very good moment, because the whole audience was like, "Oh, not an intermission, no!" And it's like, that's exactly how you want to leave an audience waiting to see what's going to happen.
Well, and sorry, go on.
And I mean, our good friend Autumn Smith always says intermission should come in as almost like the purveyor of false hope. So at that point, it's a perfect spot to put the intermission, because we think he's going to get off the island, and of course then we have the ghost wielding an axe, and it's like, oh, this is not going to end well. But I do agree. I think definitely things could have been tightened up. My main, I don't even know where gripe. I don't know what I don't know what I want to call it is, but it's the title.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about
the title is something that I felt was a bit clunky. Because when I told people I was going to see a play called Caligula Exiles, everybody went, "Oh, a Roman play, great! You're probably going to go see something, about sex and debauchery because it's Caligula." Yeah, not the case. This is not
very, very
Roman.
not the case.
Nothing Roman about it.
Nothing sexy, nothing debaucherous. It's pretty sexless, this play, aside from Phoebe occasionally swooning, but that's the extent of the sexiness and debauchness that occurs here.
Well, she does ruin the boat, but I guess not.
Yeah, but not in a sense of Roman bacchanalia, let's say.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the issue there. Ron and I both left like an intermission going, why is this called Caligula's Exiles?
To be clear, we didn't leave at intermission. We were just discussing this at intermission.
Not your intermission, both turned to each other and went, why is it called this? What's going on? This seems like a really weird thread that you kind of left in. Because usually by intermission, you understand why a play is called what it is. I mean, actually, funny enough, I just went and saw To Kill a Mockingbird, or at least To Kill a Mockingbird at Mirvish, and they actually don't drop the line about Mockingbird until the second act during the closing arguments thing. But I think enough people know To Kill a Mockingbird is kind of okay, that they can hold that. This, on the other hand, we don't know this play, so us going, okay, it's not set in Rome. This is a very sexless play. Why is it called Caligula's Exiles? It's Caligula, the ghost, going to show up at some point on this island? Who knows?
Yeah.
Turns out it's just because Phoebe has read a book where it talks about Caligula building a lighthouse, saying that I defeated the ocean, and that was that. So Round and I both were on the streetcar back, were banting about different titles that we would like to suggest. And I think Brian, there was the one where it was like her partner's name, Gus's partner.
Yeah, I forget the name of her partner.
Michelle, Sarah Lee.
Something along those lines. But yeah, we agreed. Obviously, the lighthouse is taken by the A24 horror film,
not
but
doing that. But we said it was gonna be like wherever Gus's partner's name is. So we'll say it's Sarah Lee.
Sarah Lee.
It was like Sarah Lee's Beacon, something like that. Because the lighthouse is also called a beacon, and it's the whole spoiler alert. Gus had a partner who was female, and she was a sailor, a fisher person, who went out to sea, and because this particular lighthouse was not lit because it was left neglected, her boat crashed and she dies. So Gus chooses exile herself and decides to remount the lighthouse on her own in her loneliness.
So there it is right there, though. She's exiling herself from entertaining or being in cahoots with any Caligula-esque vibes for the rest.
You know who loved entertainment? Caligula. So I don't know. It doesn't. And we both agreed that this is
a long way to get there.
And it's funny because we were talking during intermission. So why is it called this? And then we come back top of that too, and that's when Phoebe gives the monologue about the book she read and about Caligula. So it doesn't make you wait much longer, but it is still a bit of a head scratcher. And I do wonder. Because you could rename the play to something else and still have that monologue, and it's fine. You can mention Caligula in a play that's not titled the Caligula Exiles. But I do wonder if this play was called something else entirely, and you're writing a shorter version of it, or maybe trimming some fat, would that monologue have made the cut? Maybe, but also probably not.
I would say probably not, just because if you change the title, then like there's no reason to talk about Caligula at all.
Well, I think
I would say there's other monologues that Phoebe has about boats and shipwrecks you can use, and this may be the one that kind of
it was very much like, I think you could still include that if you really like it. You know, there's something about the idea of erecting a beacon to master the ocean that maybe resonates with some of the themes, but it's one of those moments where when a title is name dropped in the play itself, it should always be like, aha, that makes so much sense. But this was a case, and there have been a few other similar cases in recent memory, I won't name some specifically, where when the title's name dropped, you're like, there it is. Roll credits.
Roll credits.
But it doesn't, it doesn't feel like it justifies itself. It feels like that's what you wanted it to be called, and now you have put it in there. So I do agree that it with a different title, a refined version of this could maybe do without that monologue. Not necessarily, but possibly. Before, I don't know.
Yeah,
Jill,
Ryan, you said you wanted to talk about the end. We have about 5 minutes on this one. So.
Right.
Perfect, Ryan. Give us the end.
Okay, I think the ending is interesting. So, spoiler alert, we're with the fireworks now. Gus gets injured. It was a bit of a kind of a strangely staged moment, I will say, that of how that happens. We don't need to get into.
She breaks a leg, I think. There's a bit of a scuffle when she breaks a leg.
But
It's a very messy, unclear, because I'm pretty sure they're trying to make sure Tristan doesn't get blamed.
But it seems like it's his fault.
Well, definitely. Well, I mean, it's a moment of panic, right? Where it's like, there's a boat coming by. Let's signal the boat using the lighthouse light. And Gus is kind of saying no, and they're kind of going back and forth. And ultimately, he tries to go up the stairs. She tries to stop him. He kind of shakes her off, and in the process of shaking off, she falls off the stair and breaks a leg. It's kind of what I think they were going for. But once again, it's a small theater space, so trying to do some fight choreo in there is very tough.
Indeed. And so anyway, as a result of this injury, Gus is slowly dying and fading and having a Cosette the light is waiting moment.
I'm so glad you did the I was thinking the same.
The lighthouse is waiting. So Tristan, who very much has good reason to feel responsible for this, he feels, in addition to his own desire to get off the island, a special, interest in now let's get the lighthouse working so we can get the attention of a boat and maybe we can save Gus, get her the medical attention she needs. And Phoebe is expressing resistance at this because she doesn't want anything to change. She doesn't want them to get off.
Like a fuse or something.
Yeah, she was the one who dismantled the lighthouse earlier in the plot to prevent that from happening. So as the boat is coming and Tristan is struggling to fix it, Phoebe has to make the decision to help him fix it by restoring the thing she dismantled in order to save Gus, even though it probably means that both of her friends will leave the island and she'll be there alone, which is the one thing she fears most. So the play ends, in my opinion, very abruptly in the moment where Phoebe makes that decision, realizes that the lives of these living people is more important than them possibly dying and remaining her friends as ghosts forever. So she doesn't make that decision. She fixes the lighthouse. They're getting the attention of the boat. And then it just ends. And I don't necessarily have a problem with the inconclusiveness of the ending. Like, do they get the boat's attention? Do they save Gus? What happens? I'm fine with an ambiguous open ending. But I do think we need some kind of denouement. Like, just because the character makes an important decision and completes their arc doesn't mean the story is or has to be over at that moment. I do think, that is the emotional climax of the story. Phoebe decides to save these people when she has, good invested interest in not doing that she recognizes the value of human life. But we need something, and it doesn't have to tie a neat bow on the ending, tell us if Gus is okay. But I think another pass at the script, in addition to making cuts on some of the fat, I think does need an additional scene, and not to do anything to even change the scene we have to end it on, just to not end it there. I think we can have a more poignant ending if we do get, not necessarily closure, but some kind of thing that doesn't just leave it on, okay, the character made a decision, therefore there's nothing left to tell or do with this story. And that's really the feeling that I think we were left with here. I don't know, Matt, do you have similar thoughts or care to disagree?
I will agree. The ending was very abrupt. I would have loved maybe a silent montage moment at the end where it's a bit longer extended, where like either we see like, Tristan helping Gus out, and we see, the last kind of moments of Gus and Phoebe together, kind of acknowledging. Because, I did like the fact that by then we find out Tristan can't see Phoebe, but he knows that she's there.
Yes, which that was a nice moment.
Because, because then it's kind of like a kind of a silent acknowledgement. So you can have a silent montage ending to extend that moment out. Because we see them doing the slow wave, kind of slow motion, kind of, people on the lifeboats of Titanic waving for the Carpathia. We're here, that type of thing there, that kind of slow action moment. So I think we could have extended that moment out just a bit longer to give it more of a stronger button, because it ends so abruptly that we all were kind of like,
and even like a silent, so like I like what you're saying, that you don't even have to write more text, but almost something that, because like Gus is incapacitated for the entire ending of the show. And even if like we get just like a moment of Gus like standing up from the bed and making eye contact with Phoebe, them nodding at each other, and that could all still be ambiguous of, is this Gus dying because the boat didn't make it in time and becoming a ghost? Or is it them nodding at each other because they're saying goodbye? Like there's so much ambiguity you could still bake into something like that. But it would be a more poignant emotional beat than just Phoebe made her decision, so now the play is over. Right. Like, I think that's the feeling I was left with here. Like, and I do think, I said earlier that this is a play that doesn't need an intermission, because I do think at the end of the day, this could be a very tight 1 hour Fringe show. I think that is the afterlife that this type of show can kind of anticipate. I don't necessarily know if it's going on to like bigger stages than this, but it's a solid 3-hander. You want a small cast with Fringe. I think that's the ideal type of setting for it, and it could tour in Fringes all over Canada. Or even all over the world. I was
saying to you, Ryan, that I thought if they tightened up the script a bit more, I would recommend Stratford or Shaw picking it up and putting it in like kind of like their studio theater, like because it's a 3-hander. It's easy to do it. It's one setting. It's very easy to program. And we here on the Cup always encourage the big festivals to keep trying to promote and do new Canadian works and giving them more life beyond just the Fringe festivals. Because we always talk about in our Fringe Festival Roundup is Stratford, Shaw. Why are you not at these places, coming in and picking up these shows and giving them the next leg up, or another regional theater? Because I definitely think, as you said, Ryan, if you tighten things up a bit more, I think you definitely can get it onto the next step. for sure.
Fair.
So yeah, so we look forward to potential afterlife of
Hey.
the maybe potential afterlives of the characters that you both have mapped out. Yeah, I think that's where we'll sort of put a pin in the Caligula Exiles. Thanks to that wonderful team for showcasing the new work on the first week of the festival. So we are now going to pivot to the second show. So Ryan and myself got the opportunity to see that one. So this is Smokeville, written by Genevieve Adam, directed by Darcy Gerhardt. And it ran the second week of the festival, so November 15th through to the 19th. So Ryan, I will lob it to you to give us a little synopsis to bring us in.
Okay, so this is a bit of a stringy one to describe. It's a lot less focused than the previous one, not in a bad way. Just in fact, cards on the table, I will say, of the three, this one was my favorite. And if that colors anything I have to say about it or the others in relation to it, so be it. So Smokeville is a play about an encounter in the 18th century, I forget the exact year, that occurred between two very different type of settler colonists. We have Lady Simcoe, a fancy British lady whose husband is, I forget, is he the governor or the general, some kind of colonial authority?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have Daniel Reynolds, this kind of Canadian Davy Crockett-esque woodsman who represents a very different brand of settler colonialism, where he befriended the indigenous population. He has an ally and confidant known in the play as Auntie, and he respects the indigenous ways and learned their ways, and has formed this kind of allyship in facilitating his business as a fur trapper. And the Lady Simcoe has showed up at his house. She has, what was the old-timey disease called again? Ague. She has the ague. So she is very unwell and has taken shelter in his home. And it's about kind of romantic will they, won't they meet cute situation between them. But also, as mentioned, he has his live-in indigenous colleague, Auntie, who stays with him, and they kind of have a sort of dalliance going on all the time. And he also has a woman he impregnated named Nancy, who shows up quite pregnant with his child.
An American woman.
An American woman, a Yank from, what was it, in Boston or Philadelphia? I forget where she came from.
I can't remember the specifics.
Maybe Albany, actually. That sounds familiar.
Oh, yes, Albany. Yes.
Yeah, so she comes, quite pregnant with his baby. So all three of these women who have varying degrees of romantic will they, won't they, have they, definitely have in some cases, interest in Mr. Reynolds have all converged in his house. And a lot of it is the tensions between these women, their tensions with him. But it's sort of centered around his relationship with Lady Simcoe, because we have I won't even call it a framing device. We have a dual plot line, past and present here, where we have other characters, our sort of de facto protagonist in this present day plot line is named Crystal. She is a local librarian whose ex-boyfriend's new wife is this fancy big city historian who is riding off the success of a dystopian science fiction novel she wrote that made her a big bestseller, big name, but now wants to get back to her roots as a serious historian, so has
the character of Mallory. Sorry.
Mallory.
Yes.
Sorry.
Mallory is the wife.
Yes.
And then, and okay. Crystal is the librarian. Sorry.
Yes, apologies. There's a lot of characters in this one, so apologies if I neglect to name names in it. So yes, Mallory is this historian who comes back to this town. This is all set in Wellington, Ontario, by the way, both the past and the present plot lines. So she comes to this town with her husband, who has Emmett, his name is, and he has deep family roots in this community. And she's become very interested in this episode of local history between Daniel Reynolds and Lady Simcoe, and is now engaging the help of Crystal, this librarian who used to have a thing with her husband, to help her research this local history for the book she's going to write. So I've described kind of a lot around it. Jill, do you want to pipe in anything here before we get any further?
Yeah, sure. Just also without getting too into spoiler territory. Yeah, but like Ryan was saying, throughout the entire piece, the present and past sort of tango and are interwoven. And at first, it's very much like we have the contemporary scenes, and then through the transition where we get a little bit of historical evidence, I guess, for lack of a better word, of what they're talking about or what they need to be researching in the present. So at first, both plot lines are kind of very, this is what's happening today, this is what happened in the past. And then as the piece sort of moves on, you sort of see the characters of past and present start to kind of notice each other, or like, for lack of a better word, impregnate each other's like orbs, realms, not impregnate, but just like
penetrate.
Penetrate, sure.
Well
Using
said.
all of the Caligula terms.
Unlike the Caligula Exiles, this play is definitely not sexless.
That's very true. So yeah, so it's sort of, you get, as you kind of go on this journey through, you believe it's through Mallory's journey, right? This author kind of wanting to do all of this research. And then it's kind of neat. You get to see a staged version of what the research she might be reading or might, want to be reading. As the piece goes on, you're kind of given more information about who these people were. And then going back into the contemporary setting, you kind of get more information on who those characters are. And then again, as like the actors and the characters, start from past and present, start kind of getting in each other's orbs, you kind of see similarities between past and present as well. And we can get into that as we kind of get more spoilery.
The kind of non-short version, non-spoiler pitches. It's Arcadia. It's Arcadia by Tom Stopper.
Basically,
but instead of British history, it's an episode of Canadian history. And we will unpack some of the nuances of why it is or is not like Arcadia. But if you want a frame of reference for what this play is or trying to do, that's kind of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a massive, just like a sweep comment to offer before we get into spoiler zone, I agree with Ryan. This was my favorite piece of the two that I saw as well. And I think the use of the space, the upstairs alumni, sort of like wooded attic space, this team did a really good job of manipulating and maneuvering that space to represent historically wooden cabin vibes, and then also making it sort of a small town library. And again, we can get into that when we get into spoilers more. And like overall, the acting from the team, I thought was incredibly strong, and the chemistry. And as Brian was saying, this is not a sexless show. This did have a lot of tension and intimacy. And I thought that was very well executed. And you could tell the whole cast was just pulsing with chemistry and camaraderie. And I always say on these things, when that is present, it definitely just infuses and makes the piece stand up even taller, in my opinion. And again, when we get into spoiler zone, we can get into specifics, but that's kind of, I wanted to paint that compliment canvas. Ryan, do you have anything to add?
I'd just say before we get spoilery, I think we can probably talk about some of the cast without getting too spoilery.
Sure.
So yeah, anyone in particular? I know there was a lot of them in this one. Do you want to start shouting people out?
Yeah, Maisie Guy, again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing anyone's names going forward, but who played Our Lady Elizabeth Simcoe. Absolutely stunning work. I think she was the only character on stage that had a very RP British accent, which I admired. I think it stood her apart from the other folks who were, living or inhabiting Wellington. It kind of placed her, we know that her home roots are in England and she is just a visitor. So it kind of added her having that accent apart from the others, sold that a bit for me. And yeah, I just thought it was very well executed. And I felt like I was watching a woman of the period. I think the way she moved, the way she donned her dresses, the way...
The wig was a big detail.
Just
the corset.
really brilliant actor maneuvering of costume and gesture. And yeah, and in a piece where you do have present and past tangoing, like that's difficult. It is difficult when you are an actor and needing to know, okay, like what is my role, right? And not sort of allowing the two worlds to blend unless they need to. So I guess across the board, I think all actors did a really good job of like playing within the era that they're in. I also want to shout out Reed Martin, who played Nancy. Reed is a fellow TDS grad, as was Karen Scora and Adrian Chevalier. So just want to shout out past theater and drama studies alumni like myself. But yeah, so Reed Martin, it has been a while since I had seen her act. And man, Reed, you are feisty and furious and amazing. She played Nancy, the Yank that was impregnated by Reynolds, and she just comes in with such a fire and determination, and she's a woman of that time that really wants to push back and, you know, stands very strongly for rights for women in agency and really wanting to be more than just a vessel for her husband's child. So I just thought she really, really made that come through, but also did a really good job of swinging pendulum and realizing how she is a woman under a man's thumb. She is kind of second in her own household. And I just find she did a really good job of balancing the ferocity and frailty that women were kind of forced to kind of go one way or the other back in that time period. Yeah. I've also worked with Trina Moran, who played Auntie, and Trina is such a fantastic force on the boards. Like, she is just so grounded and eloquent in her speech, and she always knows like what her character's purpose is. She plays the like Indigenous colleague to Reynolds, and you can tell right out the get-go that like this is her land, this is her domain, you know, regardless of whose roof she's maybe living under or who comes in and out. It's Auntie is all-knowing, and she knows what's best for all these characters better than they know themselves. And I just thought like Trina did an extremely amazing job of being that force for the team. I've also worked with Camila Farah, who played Mallory.
You just know them all, Jill.
Past colleagues. Yeah. She had such an amazing poise as Mallory, you know, being our contemporary kind of lens or protagonist in a way. I mean, Crystal was as well, but she kind of coming in and providing that outside source to, you know, she's just now moving to Wellington, this small town, and she really is like this big city metropolitan energy, and she's out of place. And, you know, Emmett, we'll get into this too, but like there's some maybe undisclosed information about their relationship. So I thought, again, Camila really threaded that needle. All of the performers, but especially the women, I think overall did a really good job of threading the needle of what they want and their strength, and then what they're penned up against and what they have to face. That's where I'll stop with that. Ryan, go ahead.
I agree with everything you said. Since there's 3 actors you have yet to name, I will give them the shout outs too to cover the whole gamut. That. So in terms of other, you know, to round out the women, because sort of we have, her name is Claire Shenstone Harris. Again, apologies if I'm saying any names wrong, who plays Crystal, who really is, I think, even more so than Mallory, our POV character in the present day sequence. And she had this like very kind of like snarky but relatable, funny, like laced with irony kind of vibe to her. It was kind of good because we're encountering this past sequence of the historical episodes from the perspective of someone like Mallory, who is invested and interested and wants to know. So it kind of, because we, the audience, are sort of at a bit of an arm's reach from like, okay, but why are we following this? Where is this going? What's important about it? And the play, I think, it's unclear to me, despite its best efforts, if it really wants to be teaching us this history, or if it's sort of just like you're dropped in the middle of it. If you're not from Wellington, I don't imagine you have the same connection to it that the playwright probably does. So it's, you're kind of just in the middle of it. And I think Claire's performance as Crystal does a good job of teasing out the questions, looking with sort of one eyebrow arch to be like, okay, but what is happening here? What is the beating part of the story? Why should we care? And as she does come to care over the course of it, I think it's facilitated very well. Mm-hmm. Daniel Reynolds is played by Joseph Brown. He had this amazing, great, gruff yet sensitive woodsman energy. I think we are instantly presented with him as, you know, if we have to see a battle of wits between 2 colonists, Lady Simcoe has the upper hand by being a woman who's underestimated for her time, but he has the upper hand of being somebody who respects Indigenous ways. And I think he brought some interesting energy to that character that was really well done. Very, you know, it's understandable why all 3 of these women swoon over him, let's say.
Yes, for sure.
You know, very big, you know, cocksure energy. And then the last actor, who I believe we have not shouted yet, is Blake Pine, apologies, who played Emmett, the husband. It's a bit of a thankless role, I think, by comparison. So it's easy to sort of, I don't want to say forget about him, but he's this is a story that's first and foremost about women, especially in the present day sequence. And so he is the, well, say, unfaithful husband of Mallory, who is kind of not quite locked in a love triangle between Mallory and Crystal, because Crystal has no interest in him whatsoever at this stage, but they do have a past together, and it creates a source of tension between Mallory and Crystal's budding friendship. But he's kind of, I don't want to say like he's just like a loser, but he is this sort of lost soul where he, he's unhappy in his marriage. He doesn't know what's going on. He still has feelings for his ex. He's sleeping around with all kinds of other people. And there's a really great moment, it's not too spoilery to say, where he does interact with the past in an interesting way that kind of, I feel like we can unlock the nuances of this character in that moment. And I feel like both of the actors in that scene did a good job of, making this sort of otherwise one-dimensional character feel very human in that moment in particular, and then it reverberates throughout how we look at the character in the other scenes we've seen him in. So that's the cast. Great job to all of them, and great job to Darcy Gerhardt for directing this wonderful ensemble.
Yeah. Okay. Spoiler territory?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I guess I really want to talk about the transitions and the use of space.
Okay.
Because like I said, this is the like attic space of the Alumnae Theater, where it's like wooded. There's kind of like a slant at the back of the upstage space, if people aren't familiar with it. And the audience are sitting kind of in like almost a semicircle. So it's kind of an awkward space, not gonna lie. And there's like a very small backstage right. And then if you want to use an exit on the stage left, you're going down the stairs to maybe a backstage space. I've never been there, but also the staircase to go downstairs to the lobby is there. So there's a lot to think about. First of all, I just want to out the gate say anybody who's mounting a show for that space, as the director, you have a lot of homework and a lot of hurdles to kind of decide. So just putting out there of like, good on all these directors for dealing with maybe an awkward space in some situation. Like I said, for this piece, I think it was perfect because the small quaintness of the wooded slant with like the little tiny raised platform was a phenomenal baseline to create this old house of like early colonial time. And then adding some bookshelves with like tattered spined books that maybe don't look too old, but not too new. That's all you needed to kind of really do for the spine, if you will, of the modern library. And then how they sort of transformed and flip-flop between those two spaces is they just had like blankets, like throws. So basically at the turn of every, not just had, but the turn of every scene, you had this beautiful choreography, is what I will call it, because in an actor's track for this show, the transitions were just as important as their scenes. So again, I want to snaps to the actors because great job fluidly doing the transition. And I've been in transitions rehearsals, and let me tell you, those can be quite clunky and demeaning. So yes, go team. But basically, as you're transitioning between scenes, between eras, you'd have the actors come in and just like, if we're moving from modern to past, like some of them would strike the modern looking phone or like any bags that were brought in. And then the bookshelves were just an old timey throw were tossed over it, and bam, we're back into Reynolds' house. Right. So I just thought it was really lovely, those transitions to kind of, again, the space that you're given of what needs to move, what needs to stay, who needs to do what to set the stage. And with this piece having kind of flopping us back and forth between present and past, some of the actual scenes themselves too are vignette-y. Like they're kind of just snapshots of characters. And a lot of this happened with like Lady Simcoe, right? Where she's maybe having an ague episode and it's just sort of like a soliloquy she's saying while staring at like a match of fire or something. Or yeah, it's an actor, for example, like the piece where Nancy is like describing how she wants to be this powerful woman in this space, and while she's taking off Daniel Reynolds' shirt. So there was a lot of like, I guess like theatrical lifting of things that also had to happen alongside all of these transitions from past to present. And for like the first showcase of this new play, I thought it was absolutely brilliantly done. Again, with like the cast you have, the space you have, the time you have. I would love to see this piece, like you were saying, Mac, like happen in a studio space at something like a Shaw or Stratford. I just think there was a lot of, again, birthing out of my like transition rambling there, like a lot of themes, not only to do with, women, but men too, like, and like, you know, who we are and who society thinks we are and who we can be. And a lot of this play is doing that, showcasing that, while also it's true things like the whole past storyline existed as a part of Canadian history. So it's just like checking a lot of the boxes of like, this is a Canadian piece. It is literally taking a piece from the past and putting in the lens of the future. It is both of those time periods having a conversation with one another and unearthing some things. Yeah, this is very broad strokes, which Brian, I'll kind of have you catapult us into the specifics, but I would love to see this one definitely have a life.
Yeah, like I do. Once again, I'll say I think this was probably, of the three in the festival, it was the strongest one, and like across the board. And that's not to disparage the other two. It's just that I think, if we were doing a ranking in our head, this one would be on top. I still think there are, again, these are works of development. There are like critiques to be had. I agree with what you said, like the transitions and all of that ballet, for lack of a better word, is very well handled. A part of me kind of thinks that they maybe did a little more of it than they needed to. Every time, at least in the first few scenes, when they changed from present to past, they turned the desk around. And part of me was like, well, did they need to do that? Could they not have just worked the blocking of the past scenes with the desk in the same configuration? And that would even create more of a spatial resonance between the past and present. It seemed like, because every time we had to turn the desk and then turn it back. I think, and if Arcadia is probably the model that was being used here, keeping the set exactly the same in both versions could have gone a long way. I do love the throw blankets to just cover up the books. I think you mentioned the bookshelves. In addition to the old sort of spines of the books, there were also a lot of contemporary books on the shelves too, and the fact that both of those were commingling on the shelves, I think, is a good visual metaphor for past and present, which is and the library being this gateway between the two, which I thought was really nicely visualized there. But yeah, so like, as much as I think the transitions were beautifully choreographed, I feel like they maybe gave themselves more work than they had to if they could have like visualized it in a different way. I do, as a bit of a critique, or because, well, it's a few interconnected critiques. Like, first thing I'll say is I do think I was a lot more engaged with the past than the present sequences. And I think there's a lot of play in this play, which is interesting, but it is a little overstuffed in terms of all the things that it's doing. In addition to telling this kind of forgotten chapter of local history, it's also being in Arcadia and talking about the way we interface with history, but there's also this, complex backstory, love entanglements between the present day characters as well as the past characters. And I felt dramaturgically those things weren't always mirroring each other in meaningful ways. And I kind of get the sense that the playwright, speculatively here, was a lot more interested in the past sequence than the present sequences, but kind of felt the need to bolster up the present sequences to justify their presence, but it kind of made for a somewhat disconnected, lopsided piece. I honestly think the past sequences are so well done and so well performed and so well thought. You honestly could have just done a play of that, and I don't think you'd have people being like, but wait a minute, how are we interfacing with this history? Like, she wrote almost a perfectly good George Bernard Shaw play about people from the past debating feminism and settler colonialism that could have just stood on its own. It doesn't also have to be Arcadia. And I think that's kind of funny. Like, you write a great Shaw play, it doesn't also need to be a Stoppard play, which I think as the general critique I have, and because I was personally less invested in the present sequences, even though I think they were well done for what they were, I don't know if we need them, or at least kind of justifying their presence a little better to, weave the two stories together in a way. But sorry, do you want to comment on that before I say?
No, I do agree with you. Yeah, I do agree. Going forward, like, if they do want to keep this still like past present vibe, I do think of the two, the contemporary, just re-looking and re-glancing at the contemporary storyline and sort of, either connecting it more or fully separating it. And I do agree, it can just be a standalone historical.
It definitely can. I think too much work has been put into it at this point, and it is kind of foundational to what the piece is, that I don't necessarily recommend the playwright junk all of that. But if her interests lay more in the past, I wouldn't complain if that was the main focus.
One thing I guess I would say, like, as like a suggestion or a thought that I had is, again, I was talking about this, how as the piece went on, the sort of past present start infiltrating each other's realms. I think going forward, if you were to infuse that more, so it's a little bit more evident of like, Mallory is a depiction of this character from the past, or like I'm seeing some vibes from this past character showing up in the future, and just a little bit more clear. And it doesn't have to be like one character equals one character. Like they can have elements of both, but I guess just making that a little clearer to just make it a bit more cohesive.
Well, and honestly, like I would even go further. I would say that this is a play that could benefit from very explicit double casting between the past and present characters to really sow the seeds of, not to say that this person is that person, but having the same actor come back kind of makes the audience think more about what are we reenacting by revisiting this past? What is it about Mallory and Emmett's relationship that the prism of Lady Simcoe and Daniel Reynolds is helping her work through? That was a big thing I had. I never really understood, and maybe I missed a detail, and I'm happy to concede that perhaps I did, but I never quite understood why Mallory was so interested in this episode of local history. There was the sense that she was ashamed of the shitty book she wrote, the science fiction novel that made her a bestseller. But so and she wants to reclaim her roots as, I'm a serious historian. But like, this is her husband's towns, her family's town. Like, what is it that really gripped her about the story? And to my recollection, I don't think we were ever given that. And I know we're probably running low on time, but there's one last thing I
we have
want
about 3 minutes. So
3 minutes. Okay. I also, if we're dealing with the interplay between past and present, I know I've name checked Arcadia quite a few times here, but there's different ways of handling past and present, and I think there's sort of two schools of thought in plays that engage with both of these. There's the Arcadia school of thought, and let's call it the Serving Elizabeth school of thought. Hey, remember that play that we reviewed?
Great.
But basically those are two very different ways of having characters from the present look back on the past and staging that past in relation to the present. The Arcadia way is, the past is kind of concrete, that when we are seeing it stage, we are being explicitly told this is what happened. And when we see the characters in the present being wrong about their speculations about what happened, that is verified by, we just saw the scene from the past, so we know they're wrong when they're the way that they're trying to reconstruct it from trace elements of this historical evidence. But then you have a play like Serving Elizabeth, where we realize late in the game, spoilers for Serving Elizabeth, that what we thought we were watching as concrete Arcadia-esque past reenactments is actually the screenplay being written by one of the characters. So it's not actually what happened. This is what the characters are imagining what happened. And this play, I think, wants to have it both ways. That we have a certain scene near the end where we see that Crystal and Mallory are writing a more romantic, swooning ending a la Serving Elizabeth, but that doesn't quite gel with the things from earlier, where I feel like it is more of an Arcadia school of thought and dramatizing this past in relation to the present. I don't know. I could be wrong. If I maybe close read the script, it would maybe lean more towards one or the other, but in its current state, I feel like it's trying to be both, and as a result, maybe in a way conceptually failing to be both because they don't really play nicely. I
agree with you as well. And I think going forward, if this piece is mounted again or worked upon again, I'm very excited to see where this goes. I think,
yeah, so am I.
And there's so many different veins in which it can go, I think. And again, I said it at the top of us unpacking. I thought this was a really wonderful use of space, wonderful use of Canadian history, a wonderful uplifting of women and men and themes. It's a little bit of a Canadian Bridgerton vibes that happen in it as well.
And they make that known. They name check Bridgerton.
Oh yeah, everyone sitting in our audience, especially like the older audience members, were absolutely enthralled. So yeah, love to see the life that this one gets in the future.
Indeed.
We've talked past, present, future, and now we're taking us to the third show in the festival's installment, So this one, all three of us got to see it. So we
Yes,
can
we
all
did.
jump in and offer an unpack. So this was The Great Kelleys, written by Natalie Freya. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name. And the director is Shannon Farrell, who the two of you went to York with, actually, too.
She was one of my
yes.
residents in Winter's Residence.
Amazing. And this ran, the last week of the festival. So November 22 to the 26th. So Ryan, third time's the charm. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what this piece was about?
Sure thing. So this piece follows a family called the Kelleys, the self-described Great Kelleys of the title. And the main inciting incident of the plot is that under semi-mysterious circumstances, the patriarch of the family, what's his name, Pat Kelly, has died. He lay down in bed and was found by his wife, Wendy Kelly, and he is no more. And they have two kids who are named Kyle and Taylor. And, obviously very sad, tragic circumstances for this family. But the wrinkle is that poor grieving window into his soul, perhaps. But the grieving widow, Wendy, refuses to accept that her husband is dead and has, as a result, taken up various different religious ideas about resurrection and believes that her husband isn't dead because he's going to resurrect in a few days. So she keeps the body laying in bed, waiting for him
away upstairs.
Yes, and so the two children obviously think this is very fucked, for lack of a better word, because they recognize
There's our swear word.
Yeah, there it is. They recognize that, their father is dead. Yes, it's sad, and grief is a complicated process, but they don't know what to do with their mother. Do they indulge this superstition? After a certain point, they go a little too far or let it go too long that he is rotting up there, but it becomes that if we do call anyone now, we've missed the point where it could just be like, yep, this just happened. He's been rotting for a while. It's going to become an incident. The police might get involved. Yeah. Meanwhile, there's a very nosy neighbor named Marge who's, spying on their house from across the street, loves a good gossip and is constantly calling. Yes, she leaves very funny answering machine messages and, not light spoiler near the end, she does infiltrate the house to try to get a look for herself what's going on in there. We have Taylor has a boyfriend named Josh who, feels like he wants to know why his girlfriend is so, distraught, but she doesn't want to tell him because she's afraid that this, everyone will think it's so embarrassing that her dad is very, teenager energy more so than...
But
and Taylor and Kyle are the kids' names too. I don't know if you had mentioned
that. I thought I did, but
okay.
Apologies if I didn't.
Sorry.
Okay, yes. So Taylor has her boyfriend Josh. That's another wrinkle, and Kyle, who sort of is like kind of a main character, narrator, focal point character in here. He works as a telemarketer, which is something he's been doing since he was a teenager to pay off family debts, as we learn throughout it. And he has a very funny sidekick character named Mitch, who
you got that, buddy?
Yeah, it's his, very, Office Space type boss character who, is way too enthusiastic about working in a call center and is really kind of, biting on Kyle's nerves as he's, tries to be friends with him, get him to open up about what's going on at home. And, the highlight of the show for me was the actor was named Gordon Chan, who plays this figure. Yes. He was very funny every time he was on stage. So that's kind of our basic setup. So we have, a complicated family drama about the nature of grief with these various, surreal elements. We get a lot of flashbacks to the father on a boat. Once again, we have nautical themes and imagery coming up here. And these sort of wacky, cartoonish side characters who make the grieving process difficult by constantly trying to nudge their way in. How's that for basic non-spoiler?
That was really great cohesive. Yeah, it was good.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone else take away.
Back, do you wanna
Sure. I mean, generally speaking, Ryan, you mentioned how you felt in Caligula Exiles that the script needed tightening. This script I felt needed more tightening than Caligula Exiles.
Agreed.
Like, we can get more into it once we put the spoiler firework back up on screen. But generally speaking, it wasn't a bad play by any means. I mean, the premise of having your dead dad moldering away upstairs is a great Hitchcockian ticking time bomb where you are just waiting for someone to discover this body. So it's a great plot device, I will say. The writer came up with a very good plot device, even though oh, just the smell. I was just like, how could you be
Yeah.
sleeping in that house? Like, yes, characters react to it, but I'm like, yeah, like, oh.
Yeah.
Like, there's a bit of willing suspension of disbelief there that you could even live in that house with a body moldering away upstairs for weeks, like not
Well,
days.
Yeah.
At least 3 or 4 weeks that body is upstairs.
Well, and just the fact that like we have multiple times where characters cross the threshold into the house and then notice the smell. Like that house would be rating with smell. All
Rancid,
of the inhabitants of the house. You know, when Kyle goes to his telemarketer job, there's no way that his boss doesn't smell it on him. Same with Taylor going to school.
The smell of death.
Like, I agree. It's a bit of a, stretch your imagination about the boundaries of the smell.
Great premise for a show.
Yeah.
I will say generally, and we'll get more into this after the spoilers part goes up, I will say I enjoyed the second act more than I enjoyed the first act.
Okay.
And I will say definitely Gordon Chan as Mitch was a scene stealer. Every time he came on stage, the energy of the show picked up and it was perfect. I also want to give a big shout out to Mari McDonald as Kay. Her scene where she's sitting next to her dad's body upstairs was so beautifully, quietly heartbreaking that I was like, yes to this. This is great. And my last big shout out will be for Kane. I think his name is
Kane Wiley.
Kane Wiley. He just has a great look that
who played Kyle.
Fits that character. Yes. They all do, but just Kane. It's his eyes. It's the sunkenness of the eyes that I went. That says so much about you as a character and the stress you've been put on for having to support this family and their struggles. Like there was just that almost Tim Burton-y haunted look in his face that was so wonderful that I was like, I don't need to know anything more about your character. Your look alone, your general appearance, not even your costume, just your face says so much about this character. And even his headshot, I'm looking at his headshot right now, I'm like, yes, that is who this character is. It's wonderful. So those are kind of my, and then, I mean, I also the broad comedy that Aaron Jones brought as Marge. Like, once again, we'll get more into why it's better in the second act, but she's one of the reasons why it gets better in the second act, for sure. But that's where I'll leave it for now. Joe?
Yo, yo. I meant to say no, but I'm like, yo, Mac, that's a great lifting point for me because I feel the same. Yeah, I think agreeing with what I think both of you have said, this script to me of the three of them, I think I would love a little bit more excavating and sort of a needlework of going back in and revisiting, some of the writing. And I think lengthwise too, like this one definitely, I think could be scaled down, shaved down, but still resonating beautifully because like Max said, like there's a lot of poignant moments that the characters going through their grief, and as smelly and very deep and eerie, them sitting on the bed having those moments with their father's corpse. It's such an interesting, visceral, even image to say out loud. It does strike a lot of those chords, but I think by sort of culling the piece down, those can be magnified even more. I want to shout out the set dressing. I think Shannon, as our director, I thought it was beautifully, again, the space was decked beautifully in my opinion, because we've talked about nautical themes, and yes, Pat, the Great Kelly himself, the patriarch of the family, is a sailor, and a lot of the hues that you have on stage are nautical colors. You have like the beige of the sands, you have like the turquoise of the waters, and you even have their kettle looking like a standard yellow boat slicker that a captain would wear on a ship in a storm.
Or as a character, his costume is the same.
Exactly. So, and then just having that, again, the backspace sort of lifted, and as that being the master bedroom, that the characters hearken back to the upstairs. Again, just good use of space there. My shout outs as well, kind of similar to you, Mac, Mari McDonald and Kane Wiley as the Great Kelly children. I thought they really were, for lack of a better word, the anchors of this piece. I want to talk about Kane first, because Kane, quite literally, really early off in the piece, he adds Kyle, breaks the fourth wall, and instantly is like, hello, might as well have shaken our hands, being like, I'm the audience point of view, and kind of gives us exposition of their family and what has gone on and who he is. And that stays true throughout most of the piece. Near the end, it kind of muddles, which we'll get into, but I just thought, again, he carried that beautifully. And again, from an actor point of view, I think the gesture, his right hand had a twitch throughout, and that kind of became a common nervous twitch that Kyle has throughout the whole piece. And I always look for specificity in actor gesturing, and I thought that was really, really, really brilliant. Also, the way he was holding his body, kind of like feeling almost like he's like, oh, gonna topple over, and like this young body, but like with like almost like a hunched back. To me, it was a very awesome visual cue of like, he is holding the burden of this entire family on his shoulders. And just the interactions he has with every character was very specific and true to who Kyle was as a character, but also to what the piece needs the character to be too. So shout out to Kane there. And then just talking briefly about Mari as Taylor again, because the siblings are quite a large age gap apart, which is really interesting because the actors of Kane and Mari look like they maybe could be the same age or only several years apart. And I thought the two of them did a job of when they were in a scene together, showing that like this is big brother and little sister. Like there's a lot of years. Their relationships to their parents with their parents are very different. And as someone, Jillian Robinson, who I also have siblings that are 8 or 10 years older than I am, that is a thing. You do, you know, you're by nature of how old you are, your relationship to each other and to your parents are vastly different. And I thought they did a really good job of tangoing that together. And then, just Mari's choices as Taylor of being this like high school teenager, everything is embarrassing to her, not really caring, sort of being selfish and blunt. And again, I think the two of them did a really good job of anchoring the outlandish circumstances that all of these characters find themselves in. So I think that's where I'll kind of cap my comments and praise before we dive in. Should we dive in? Here's our last firework. This has been quite a beautiful fireworks show throughout. So we're in the spoiler field. So let's unpack.
Okay, can I say one thing first?
Yes.
The coffee table.
Oh
my gosh. Okay, Ryan was...
So here's the thing.
What about the coffee? Well, I was in the back row, so I couldn't see the coffee table.
Okay, well, you're lucky because there is a coffee table in the middle of their living room, and every time we have a flashback to Pat Kelly, the father, on the boat, he's like running all over the stage, he's screaming, like batten down the hatches, and he jumps on that coffee table, and the legs are so wobbly, and every time it happened, I grab Jill's arm and be like, oh my god, it
was like a stage manager.
Like I was just so worried we were gonna watch those legs collapse underneath him and he was gonna break his neck. And like, I guess this is, kind of a minor, like it's a safety concern first and foremost, but it takes you out of the moment. Like you cannot get invested in these flashbacks if you're watching thinking, I hope this actor doesn't die right in front of me. Like it's, talk about corpsing. But
to be fair, there was a couch behind it and it wouldn't have been a fall. Big fall, but
it really made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and not in a way that I believe the production intended. I don't know if it, he was a big guy, the actor who played him, Brooke Friendly, his name is. And,
great name.
Yeah, but I got very worried, and they did it so often, and it wasn't necessary. Like, if we're talking the staging wise, he could have done all those same, shouts not standing on the table. There was even some moments where Kyle jumped up with him, or they were sitting on it together, and it just, unfortunately, that, before we even get into, like, the dramaturgical specificity of the script, that was something that just pulled me out, and it happens so frequently that I got very, very concerned. I don't know if tightening the legs would have solved the problem, or just getting a more sturdy table, but they must have at some point noticed in rehearsal that table is not structurally sound, and I wish they would have maybe revised the blocking accordingly. I said my piece about it.
No, I will say, just like while we're on that frame, I think of tightening the legs of the table, I think there was a lot of moments of Pat Kelly's sort of, were either meant to either depict those moments of him sporadically around either harkening back to the boat accident that did happen with him and Kyle years back, or it's him kind of wading these purgatorial waters of like,
Mhm.
I am dead, but I'm not actually dead. I haven't been laid to rest. I'm up in my bed. Like, I
Mhm.
think, and the actor's movement of that, tightening that a little bit, because there was
Mhm.
also an instance in the show that Ryan and I saw. There was a patron who showed up late and came up.
Oh,
the
I
street
had
all the
that
way
too. I even had two people who
into,
got stuck and then coming back from intermission, waiting on the stairs to try and find a
Yeah.
spot to get across.
Now, like, that's going to happen, but like in the
Yeah.
moment that it happened with us was quite early on. And I'm not even kidding you, like 2 minutes later, or not even like a minute later, it was the blocking where Pat throws the red buoy line over that banister, like uses that exit as like a banister of the boat. And again, part of me was like, that patron, if they were a hair later than they would have gotten hit with that string. So I just think, to me, in those more wily moments of story, again, it just kind of, it seemed like I knew what the team was going for and showcasing that. But it's the classic thing of like, as actor and cast, you have to be, it's almost like when you are playing wild episodes like that, you actually have to be more structured and focused as the actor to create that chaos. Because if it becomes just pure chaos, then it's not rooted in the story. Safety is a concern. So yeah.
And what I'll add to that is, similar to, we didn't necessarily need him to jump on the coffee table to signify that he's on a boat and yelling. We didn't need him to throw that red rope over the banister if, it's a fine visual image, but if that is an entrance and exit for audience latecomer seating, I feel like, we could have restructured this differently. If there was a lot of choices that kind of were questionable dealing with the space and props and setting and infrastructure that we were given here, that would have been fine in a different type of production, but maybe just needed more consideration about the space we're working with.
Can I go one step further, Ryan?
Please.
Sure.
I don't think we need the dad character at all.
Oh.
I would actually cut the dad entirely and just have him be a body upstairs. Like put a dummy body in the bed and leave it. Because I think the play, like, we're talking about tightening and pacing. Some of the scenes that Drake was not saying that Brooke Friendly was bad. He was great. But I think the whole flashback purgatory scenes and the fact it takes so long to get to the whole conclusion of the whole shipwreck situation, the payoff is so far away that I was like, okay, why do we keep flashing back to this? Like, the pacing in the first act, I hate to say it, was so slow that I was like, could we not have tightened up the first act? The second act picks up way faster, and we finally get into the action of everybody showing up at this house, dealing with this situation. But for me, like, I just found we could cut that character, and I think the piece would actually be stronger, because then we don't see the dad, and it's all recollections told via monologue through people's interpretation of this man.
Well,
who has had such an impact on their lives, even though we never get to see him. It's kind of just that unseen figure of the family. But yeah, he's had the biggest impact because of what he's done.
It's so interesting you say that, Mac, because I actually think you're right. That didn't even really occur to me. But what's interesting about that is that because Brooke Friendly comes back in Act 2 to play two different non-Pat characters. One is the police officer who's evicting them, and the other is Marge's husband, Bill, who we've heard about before but never seen. Here's the thing about that, because
we're dealing with resurrection.
Well, we're dealing with exactly that. When he comes in, with a very not police uniform looking costume change, and you see him, I literally spent this whole play wondering that, like, I think he's gonna resurrect. I kind of feel like this is, but that's the thing. We spent so much time. We spent so much time entertaining this idea, and it's a play. It's fantastical. We have these bonko characters that, yes, it's trying to say something poignant about grief, but at the same time, it is just, anything can happen in this space. And wouldn't it be interesting if, I don't know what it would say thematically per se, but wouldn't it be interesting if he does resurrect? So then
I thought it was Bill. That's what he came back as, because they talked about him going to Disneyland at one point. So the fact he's wearing like this Hawaiian shirt, I was like, wait a minute, did he like fake his death?
Well, it fooled me twice. I was fooled twice, both times when the cop came in and then when Bill came in, I thought, here it is, we got the resurrection. And it doesn't. So because it doesn't pay off that, I kind of thought the resurrection would be the thing that justifies having this actor embody this character, to have him be on stage. And when that doesn't happen, and I'm not saying it has to happen, but yes, I agree that something like what you're suggesting, have this character exist through recollection and absence more so than flashbacks and presence. I think he had good scenes. Like there was the one where he and Kyle are on the boat together. But dramaturgically, I don't think we need them. Agreed.
Yeah, I would also say, just talking about, slimming down and Act 1 versus Act 2, which I think after I'm done saying this, Mac will probably lead into more of the character work you want to talk about of Act 2. Because, it was interesting, like Act 1 and Act 2 from a form point of view seemed too different in a sense. Like, they set up that it's Kyle explaining exposition of like what's going on, and then we get flashbacks and sort of it's this like, okay, that's the mechanism that we're sort of using to have the story. But then Act 2, and I kind of can understand and justify this, like as the bolts start to loosen even more and more, and more people who aren't the Kelleys find out and they start coming into the house, I understand like that's going to disrupt the form. But it just kind of felt like by the end of about halfway through the second act, we were too pulled away from what the play was setting up. That it started to honestly change form. Like, like we were watching a sitcom, and then similar to kind of what you both mapped out. Again, I didn't see it, but in the Caligula Exiles of like an abrupt ending, I think this piece had that as well, because there was that pull away from how the piece was setting us up mechanically. The ending was quite abrupt in this. And in a way that I was a bit like confused of what are we supposed to sort of take from this? Because again, it was like my brain was like, we were at a sitcom. We went from this like Hitchcockian sort of, Tim Burton American Horror Story setup, but also interspersed with wonderful heart-evoking monologues, which I think was a neat sort of brain jumble for my, for me. But then at the end, it was kind of
don't play nice.
Exactly like some sort of bow on why what we saw was what we saw is what was lacking for me.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll give a big shout out to Aaron Jones, who, and also Jordan Chan, who went for that full sitcom level of broadness that totally worked for me. Because once again, the energy really picked up, and once again, in this very wacky situation of a body moldering way upstairs that is now bloated to the point where you really can put your hand on the body, and your handprint, is there, like. We've gotten to a very bad place of body decomp at this point. Like, it's not like just one thing. Like, it's so the fact that like we're getting that broad of you could not be in that house at that level of decomp. The smell would just be so overpowering that I was like, okay, if we're going for it, let's just go full ham and have some fun with that. I will say, Valentine, Dean,
Valentine,
his scream when he sees that body was so wonderful and broad. Like, once again, the second act, they went for it, and I applaud them for it, but I think what needed to happen is I think the ending would have been better if throughout the whole play, Kyle couldn't go up and see his dad for whatever reason. And then the last little bit of the show is he has to go up and see his dad and have that final conversation with him. And if you do want to put the dad character in, that's where you can have that wonderful scene of them talking to each other on the dock, because you can talk about, we had that big moment in the storm and we never had a conversation about it. And all of a sudden, here it is. That could have been a much lovelier ending. I think that would have brought everything together, because I think the elements were there. They just had to kind of be re-shaved and a bit whittled into a new spot to make it fit better. I don't know. Ryan, as a dramaturg yourself, Asian theorist man. Let's say.
Well, if can I just comment on one thing? I agree with you, Mac, and I think also like in a rewrite of all of this, deciding between Taylor, Kyle, and Wendy, what is their relationship with the body? What was their relationship with the living body, like with husband, father, and what is it with it now? And deciding. Again, this would have to happen in the text first, but then through the direction, deciding like who goes up to this now dead body, who refuses to go up, right? You have maybe some characters that are constantly going up, like Wendy. Then you maybe have a Kyle who's refusing to go up until that last moment.
Yeah.
And then maybe you have Taylor in the middle, right? Like
Yeah,
only
where
going
she
up in
just
dire
resists and goes up.
circumstances or whatever. And then again, I think it's just a little bit more in depth of like what all of these characters' relationships are to Pat and why in Pat's corpse form are they the way they are now. And I think that would be a lot more telling for each Kelly, like living Kelly character, and also justify the sort of just body representation of Pat on the bed.
Yeah.
Brian, do you want to kind of
Like,
piggyback on that?
yeah, I know I've given like dramaturgical thoughts and critiques and suggestions with all the plays, but of the three, unfortunately, I feel like this one needs the most work if it is going to be revived elsewhere or is still in progress. I get almost like a lot of sort of large scale overhaul things. Like there's, some little things that feel still pretty foundational, like the fact that Wendy's vision of what her husband's resurrection even means or the mechanics of how it works. On one hand, to use the phrase resurrection means she must be aware that he's dead because she's expecting him to rise from dead. Yet she keeps acting like I had a conversation with him this morning and we were talking. Like these are two visions of he's not really dead that don't work with each other. Pick one and commit to it. And because there is this sort of funny religious imagery of Lazarus raising from the dead or Jesus raising from the dead, that I think that's the one I would have picked. But then don't have it that I just spoke to him or why won't you eat your dinner? Her grief and denial should be manifested constantly in you're gonna get up, you're gonna wake up, not I just spoke with him this morning. That those things, they don't work together, they don't make sense together. I do think, here's the thing, we learn in the backstory that both parents suffer from some kind of possibly diagnosed. I don't remember if they said if it was ever like clinically diagnosed, but okay, as somebody
who not diagnosed, but that's what Tay describes it as.
And as somebody who a lot of my family members do have bipolar, that's not how it works the way that it was described in the play most of the time. Like, or they used, I think there was an inconsistency in it, and I don't know to what degree the playwright is dealing with own family experiences or their own experience with this particular mental illness, or if they did a sufficient amount of research. But there were like lines in the play about how from one day to the next, he's up, he's down, like back when he was alive. And like, no, it's bipolar works on like longer cycles of long periods of manic and long periods of depressive that I don't think.
Well, they do say that sometimes where he'll go lie down and he'll almost be comatose for weeks and then he'll pop up the next day.
When
he kind of justifies it is, he's comatose for 3 weeks and he's going to pop right up and go right off to work like always.
Oh, and that's the thing. And I think I don't think I'm misremembering. There was also a line about one day to the next, up, down.
Correct. One day the next day we're going off to Disneyland.
More medical, psychological consistency would be nice. And here's, I guess, just a larger structural critique, because I know we're a little pressed for time here, but part of me feels like there is an interesting metaphor for mental illness in this piece. That yes, as far as the characters are concerned, they are in a literal circumstance where their father is dead, but yet he's still present, and they're all dealing with this. But I think within that literal situation, there is a pretty potent metaphor about relating to a parent or family member with a mental illness, and bipolar in particular, that, they are absent and yet present, and you want to talk to them, you feel like they'll get up any moment, and yet at this time they're completely, and and also the ideas of grief and dealing with that the Wendy's situation of he's going to be okay, sort of denying the mental illness in this way. And I think there's like this, again, the situation is literal for the characters, that he is dead and the mom doesn't want to acknowledge it. Could have been a very good metaphor, but I get the sense that the playwright didn't think of it as a metaphor in that regard. Maybe she did, maybe that, I'm wrong about that, but if so, then I don't think it's communicated very well in the way that the situation was dramatized here. I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done with this script, and not even just a matter of tightening, of just thinking through the implications of what kind of play does it want to be? What is it trying to say? Is it about mental illness or is it about death? And there's a lot of these things, again, it's just too many elements that are thrown at the wall but never quite cohere into a really good play, in my opinion, which is unfortunate.
And just to add to that too, I know we've been talking about how some of these plays, even though they were part of this festival, they're vignette-y. And then that happens a lot with new works as well, right? Is where you have sort of this storyline, but also sometimes the story is like sections and scenes that maybe are still in workshop process or and I did find with this piece too, like some of the scenes, and this is kind of irregardless of form, but maybe also talking about it as well. I wondered, like, that was a great scene. I like that we got that scene, but why is that even included? Or like, again, to me, it goes into even with our more sort of cartoonier characters or sitcom-y characters like Mitch, like Marge, like Josh. Again, looking at those characters, and this again starts in the writing of why are those characters the people in our protagonist's life that are, again, I'm going to use it again, an outside anchor for them.
Right.
You know, why is Josh Taylor's point? Why is Mitch Kyle's point? Why is Marge Wendy's point? And I think there's a lot to digest and unpack with that. These are people that are either intimately involved, people that are either have been in lives for multiple years, people that are each other's boss. Like these are all sort of like and it mentions it in the play, outside your own family, you know, your work family, your partner, your neighbor. And going into those scenes and kind of with a lens of like, okay, when these characters are offering an outside eye, a sort of green flag to pull this family out of their grief and out of this sort of very distraught environment they've placed them in, I kind of wanted a bit more of those scenes to be like evident that these characters are offering of life support, I guess, like a life reserve, you know? But I felt like that didn't come through in all of the scenes for me.
And I think a reason for that is because with the exception of Josh, none of these are characters that the Kelleys choose to be with.
Right.
Like Kyle wants nothing to do with Mitch. He's his annoying boss. And Marge is a nosy neighbor who Wendy would rather have nothing to do with. So Josh, and the fact that those are three very different dynamics, I think speaks to what you're saying, that there isn't like an obvious connected thread of why these people. It's sort of just, this is somebody
Marge
that
wants to pay off the eviction notice. Like,
well, yeah, like she thinks that she and Wendy are great friends, but Wendy clearly does not want anything to do with her. And,
so here's,
please. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Just like a hot take on that too. Like the fact that when the cop shows up and all of their like companion characters, like we said, Josh, Mitch, and Marge are all going to bat for the Kelleys. For a second, this is like very like, whoa, but I was like, are these people gonna like kill the cop? Or like for a second I thought like the Kelleys, I'm like, the Kelleys, are they gonna be like, and now we are gonna kill Marge and Josh? And like there was just a tiny moment of like,
don't eat the pie.
Well, and I think that also kind of does speak to the shortcomings of the play, that like this could have gone in any direction, that we don't, there was no tonal consistency in where is this even going, what could even happen. It wasn't like an exciting, ooh, what's going to happen. It's this play could literally do anything and I wouldn't be surprised. And I don't think that's
it was almost
compliment.
Like when you pass hold, like you are now not going similar to Pat's body, you're not allowed to leave. And like, and then the lights go down and they're trapped in the Kelleys' house. Like what happens? But yeah, so agree across the board. Mac, do you have any final comments?
I mean, once again, the Great Kelleys, like, you know, there's something really good here. And I don't want this cast or this crew to think that we did not like it, because I did enjoy it.
Yeah.
The second act was really fun. Like, I was having a grand time watching what was going on. And I mean, Jordan Chan as Mitch was always a scene stealer in Act 1 and Act 2. And, you know, there's a lot of strong elements here. I just think, as Ryan said, this is the piece that I would love to see developed more, because I think you got something really good here. You got a really good concept here. It just needs to be refined a bit. This is the piece that needs the most kind of, you know, tenderizing to get it to where you want it to be. Because I think you got something, but you need to do a little bit more tenderizing, a little bit more work on it. And hey, you know what? Reach out to Ryan. He's a great dramaturg. He'll happily work with you on your script.
I've basically just been giving free dramaturgic suggestions to all three plays this whole time.
Any of these plays, reach out to Ryan. He's great.
Exactly. Yeah, so amazing. I think that sums up the FireWorks Festival 2023 that happened at Alumnae Theatre.
And happy anniversary to Alumnae Theatre.
Yes,
exactly. So on that note, before we sign off officially,
sail off into the horizon, as they say.
Exactly. Mac, where can people find and follow you?
You can follow me at Mackenzie Horn on all social media platforms. You can also follow my musical antics over at Before the Downbeat, a musical podcast. Right now, we are in the midst of releasing Ryan and I's first season review miniseries of the short-lived, but yet well-loved. I've had a lot of messages of people going, "Oh, I'm so glad you're talking about this." Gallivant. Yeah,
Nice.
So Ryan, we can say that definitely season 2 will be
Okay.
reviewed at some point.
Now that the
People
fans
are
have
like-
demanded it.
They have.
Great.
We have quite a few people. Actually, even Rachel Fisher reached out and
nice.
said that she is a
Hey.
big fan of the show, Gallivant,
Nice.
and that's what brought her on to the podcast. So there you go.
Cool. Nice.
Fantastic. And Ryan, where can people find and follow you?
Well, I guess, usually I say don't bother, but Max, since you did basically plug my services as a freelance dramaturg, I guess if you want to talk to me, and I know I've said some contentious things about some of these shows, about the improvements I think they can make, so don't send your ire to the Cup if you're mad about anything I said. Send it to me. I'm at Ryan Barakovich, just my first and last name, no punctuation, on Instagram. I don't use it much, but if you want to follow me, that's the place I would suggest doing that, unless you know me personally, in which case you can use Facebook. That's where the friends request friendship with each other.
Great. And folks can find and follow me. My artist Instagram account is jillian.robinson96. I post some covers of stuff, some upcoming events. I had the opportunity of actually mentoring a production of Legally Blonde happening at Art House this coming February 15th to the 17th.
Ooh.
So that's been a really fun journey to kind of be there, part of that team. So yeah, that's kind of what I want to plug on that front for now. And as always, follow the Cup. We are Cup of Hemlock Theatre. Follow us on any podcast platform that you use. You can follow us at YouTube, subscribe, like, pop down in the comments if you so wish. And yeah, follow us on all social media, Instagram, Facebook. We love to have you as a part of our community. So on that note,
cheers.
It is flu season. Stay safe, stay well, stay hydrated, and keep on going out to see the arts because they're here to talk about, they're here to act about. And on that note, we're going to cheers about it. Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Have a great day. Bye.